Okay, so this is sort of where we had stopped. And this is kind of like what your assignment is all about. We're saying if you know that in retirement, this is the amount of income that you're going to need, right? And the inflation rate is at 2% pre and post retirement. You know you have 28 years till retirement, and you're going to have 30 years in retirement. So you retire at say 60, and you assume that you're going to live to 90. The question then, of course, we ask ourselves is, what sort of savings do you need at retirement? And that's the first thing we figure out, right? And then once you figure out how much savings you need at retirement, then you figure out then how much do you need to save now in order to meet that. Of course, your assignment has a slight modification, right, Nathan?
Yeah.
And that is that you have to also factor in for the house that you want to buy. So it turns out that you can do it different ways, and it's up to you. I'm interested to see what you come up with. You might decide that you will save and save and save a certain amount until you buy the house, and then after buying the house, then the amount you save is slightly different, and so on. Or you could just save the same amount all through, and partway through you buy the house and make your mortgage payments and so on, and it all works out fine. There are certain discretionary variables, of course, like those that you will need to take. So you will need to decide, for instance, when you're going to retire. So this will be discretionary, what year you retire at. Discretionary. What else do you think might be discretionary? That will be something that you would choose. What do you think, Simon? Something you would choose?
Initial investment.
Okay, so you might decide to choose that this, for instance, this initial investment, you might decide, okay, this becomes discretionary. Although, if you have $5,000, that's what you've got, right, and so on. So, okay. The other thing too, of course, is that you've made this assumption here that this is how much you can earn in your savings account or your investment account. That's 6%. You might want to essentially find out what happens if I can earn less or earn more. So you might want to find out how much do I need to earn in this account in order to meet my objectives. So it's not a discretionary variable, but it's a variable of interest that you might want to be able to figure out. Okay, how do we find out the savings we need at retirement? Well, we use our adjusted I. Is that right, Olivia? And we know we get this here from this formula. Okay? Right. So there's our formula here. 1 plus I divided by 1 plus G minus 1. And for many people I've seen already, people who've been by my office, they've decided, of course, to name these cells. Okay, so this will be our present value function that we would use. And we're going to use the adjusted rate. The number of periods here is 30 years. And our payment is $15,000. So this, of course, is also something your model needs to figure out, right? So it's not a discretionary variable. The model will need to figure out what sort of retirement income you need. Now, we know what your income is now, $36,000. That's for the first year, $36,000 for you. Or, yeah, you're good with that? Okay. And it's growing at a particular rate, and so you know how much it will have grown to by the time you retire. Another discretionary variable, Val, is what percentage? What percentage did you pick? So, So at the time you retire, your income might be say 90,000. And you have to decide that when you retire, what you want to live on is say 50% of 90,000, 60% of 90,000, 70% of 90,000. We know from the survey, okay, from the research done, it should be somewhere between 50 to 70% of the retirement. So you get to choose, okay, depending on what sort of lifestyle you want to live. You get to choose what income you're going to retire on, right? But that should be a discretionary variable. It should be something your model allows to adjust quite easily. So you want to see the impact of living off 50% or 55 or 65% and so on. Anyways, in this case here, we have our 15,000 and our future value is 0. The future value being 0 is again something that's discretionary. Many people, for instance, choose to leave a certain amount to their kids. So they no? Okay. Don't tell my kids that they're dreaming of us. No. But yeah, if you decide that you're going to leave them Zippo, that's up to you. Just don't tell them.
You can leave them with debt, though, right?
Huh? Well, I mean, unless you have your whole funeral cost set up, yes, you're leaving them with debt, so they're going to have to pay that. They won't be happy with you. Right? I mean, let's just cremate the bugger and get it over. Okay, so. Okay. Now this type that's here now becomes important because as Clay pointed out, if this is type 0, then we have to make a further adjustment here. If it's type 1, then we're done. Okay. Type 0, type 1 means do you take out the money? Do you take out your retirement income at the beginning of the year, or do you take it out at the end of the year? So what do you think? Let's take it out at the end. Yeah, for now. Okay. No, let's take it out at the end. So we'll put 0 here, and because we've put 0, we'll divide them by 1 plus origin. This is pretty much the savings we need at retirement. Let's we'll need, it doesn't seem like a whole lot, but we'll need 256,000 at retirement. Okay. So based on that, we have to figure out then how much to save now. Okay? And the amount you want to save now then would be the payment. And our payment then, we're going to use the same rate. And the reason why we're using this same rate is, for this simple example here, our earnings and inflation pre and post retirement are assumed to be the same thing. Right here. So I assume we're earning 6% and inflation is 2%, both before retirement and after retirement. So we're using the same adjusted rate. If your savings rate is different and your inflation or cost of living adjustment is different pre and post retirement, then you'll have 2 different rates. This rate you'll use here, but then you'll have a second rate to calculate your payment, right? So, okay, number of periods then, this is 28 years. Our present value, as we know now, we'll use this as our future value. What? Oh, sorry.
Be like 5,000.
So if you have, okay, we'll put in 5,000. Let's see. Yeah. So we'll leave this 5,000 in here as positive, and we'll leave our payments in as positive, and then this will come out at the end. So now we'll put this guy, this is our future value, and top type 2. This is okay. What have I done wrong? I shouldn't be using this as my interest rate right now. That is, this annuity is not growing. So I should just have this in there. Okay. So what's going into your savings account is earning 6%, and that's it. It's not growing. So you want that to essentially okay. I think yes.
It's not growing, but if we use the lower rate, wouldn't it be more conservative, like to account for inflation, so we'd end up having a higher number?
Well, that's true, but what you have is you will have accounted for inflation per se, but the amount you have in your account will be bigger than this. So if you want to account for inflation, maybe you should adjust this and then still use the 6%. But if this is what you want in your account when you retire, that's the amount you want in your account when you retire, then you should use the 6%. Okay? Okay. Not sure what that is. So that's what you got, the 3.7, no?
I'm just doing it savings needed at retirement. Like the one on top.
Oh, you didn't get this guy up here? Did you divide by 1 plus G?
Oh, no. Okay, that's fine.
So your assignment is just a little bit more complicated than this, in that you have to account for one, the salary is growing at a particular rate, and then two, there is a certain amount you want to save for the mortgage. And yes, Nathan, the mortgage payments, you should factor that in, okay?
So what interest rate do we use? We just pick one for that mortgage?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you assume it's constant all the way through, or?
Yeah. Okay? Yes. Which is a little bit, I mean, here in Canada, it's tricky. In the United States, you can get 30 years.
Should it be set up as like a variable into it, or we can have a lot of them would adjust?
Yes, so what you should do is the mortgage rate itself, you can set that up as being variable input. And since your time to retirement is variable and so on, you can actually use the same model to track what happens over time. So now you pick this model, you have 30 years to retirement. 5 years from now, the amount you receive in the account is different. Mortgage rates have changed. Time to retirement is 5 years shorter. You just make the adjustments and you see what's going to happen moving forward. Yeah.
I missed the formula for savings needed at retirement. Could you just click on the cells?
So it's important though that aside from the formula itself, you know what these things all are. Right here, that's important. Yeah. So it's important. Okay, and so with that,
one last assignment related question.
assignment related, sure.
Okay, so problem 2 part C, or sorry, B, it says if the rate of inflation after increment increased 2.5, increase to 2.5 or increase by 2.5%.
Increase to 2.5.
Are you going to do this one time? Right.
Is that an assignment question? So yes, I thought that I would extend the deadline from Wednesday to Friday. I don't know what you think about that. Everyone is in agreement with that. No one complains. Levi looks like she's unhappy. She's done. She just wants to
I'm
stop.
happy.
Okay. Okay, so the percentage, so this is sort of simple. We can just simply say that this is how much you're saving. You're saving 8% of your salary every year. Okay? In your case, of course, there are two ways you can go about it. You can calculate the payment you need, right? And if you calculate the payment you need, your percentage of your salary will actually change year by year. And you can show how the percentage changes every year, how it gets smaller and smaller, you're saving a smaller and smaller percent of your salary. Or you can actually have a fixed percent of your salary and have your savings change every year. So with that, of course, it means the amount of savings you have every year is going to be variable, okay? So it won't be the same cash flow that you're saving every year. It won't be this amount you're saving every year. It's going to change. If it starts to change, if the cash flow year by year changes, if you don't have this nice, even cash flows, how do you deal with that situation when you have uneven cash flows? So that's the next thing we want to speak about, dealing with uneven cash flows. Because if you put that into your model, the uneven cash flows, and you're able to sort of deal with that, then you can allow the percentage of your salary to be fixed, but the amount you save every year changes, okay? And in this case, then, all you have to determine, possibly using Solver, is what percent of your salary will meet your objective. Now, I'm not saying you have to do that. I'm just saying this is an alternative to having a fixed payment, okay, and a changing percentage. You can have a fixed percentage and a changing payment. In fact, for most people, at the end of the year, the amount you save really depends on how much you've made that year. Okay, so the next thing we deal with then are uneven cash flows. With uneven cash flows, instead of using the PV function and instead of using the payment function or the rate function to find the interest rates or the present value, that is, with even cash flows, these are the functions that we use. We use the PV function, the payment function, the FV function, and the interest rate, the rate function here a number of years. But this requires then that the payment be constant. Now we know how to adjust it if it's growing at a constant rate, but suppose it's not, suppose it's just uneven. How do we deal with that? Well, we switch over. Instead of using PV, we use MPV, and instead of using rates, we use the internal rate of return. So these are the two functions then that we want to deal with here. So let's go to uneven cash flows and see, suppose this is the case here. Suppose in year one you decide to save 1,000, year two you decide to save 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000. And this is because it's a fixed percentage of your salary. How do you find what the present value is and how do you find what the future value is? So as it turns out, there is no formula for finding the future value directly. Okay, you always, when you're dealing with uneven cash flows, you always have to find the present value first, and then take that present value to the future using the future value function. So the function we say you use then here in Excel, and we're going to use this function extensively when we get to capital budgeting for firms. So, and that's the MPV function. I guess it was in there already, but let's put it in, okay? The MPV function. So again, it uses an interest rate. And again, the interest rate has to be expressed as a percent, so you can use 11% or 0.11, I don't want to use. And the values here. With the MPV function, and this will become important when you are doing capital budgeting, the MPV function always assumes that the first cash flow happens in year one. And the second cash flow happens in year two, third cash flow happens in year three, and so on. but the first cash flow happens in year one. So if your first cash flow happens here times 0, you actually have to ignore that one and just use the second cash flow here and then add in the first cash flow outside the MPV function. Okay? Outside. So let me first do what now. Once the range, of course, is contiguous. So once the range is contiguous here, you can just highlight that. And this then is the present value of all these cash flows here. With the PV function, it would have given this as negative, but of course, with the MPV function, it doesn't. It just gives it as positive. That's the PV then of all of this. How do you find the future value? Well, then, I guess, you have to take this to the future, okay? Number of periods is 5, payment is 0, and our PV, now we have to put this in as negative here. So to find the future value, this is the amount, okay? So you first find the present value. You first find the present value, and then you take the present value 5 years to the future in order to find the future value. So it's uneven cash flows. That's sort of what you have to do. Okay? Now, of course, if all you are interested in is the future value, and you have no interest in the present value, then of course, instead of using this helper cell, and this helper cell is okay, again, if you want, but instead of using the helper cell, you could simply just take this that you have here, and so instead of minus B9, you put that in here. So instead of having this helper cell, you simply put that in here, in which case then you could, I'll just hide it for now, you could ignore the present value since everything you have is in there. Fair enough? Simar? Okay. So Simar, one last thing. Let me insert something here, times 0. Let's assume, for instance, that you made a $1,500 payment at times 0. Okay? So right now you put in $1,500, and then you plan to put in 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, and so on. How do you find the future value, the present value of all of this? So what we said essentially was, in using the MPV function, okay, the first payment has to be 1 year out. So really, you would still have 1,000 here, 2,000, 3,000, and so on. And this 1,500, you actually don't put inside the MPV function. Okay? So what you would do then is you would simply add that, okay, to it. If you don't, it'll end up assuming that this 1,500 is happening here and will discount everything back 1 extra year, and you don't want that. So that's what you would put in. So if you're dealing with uneven cash flows, okay.
I just had a question though for the assignment. Do we have to build? Do we have to build a table like that, or if we just use like the cost of living adjustment and use like I star to get a different rate that is growing at a constant rate for the salary?
Yeah, but I would like to see a table. So let me show you now. This, of course, is our sort of retirement worksheet. Let's move to here and deal with a table. So I'd like to see essentially a table of what your annual savings amount would be, what the balance in your savings account would be, and I'd like to see that the balance in your savings account matches what you think you will need when you retire. Okay? And then I'd like to see you graph what you've done, and we'll take a look at graphing pre and post retirement.
Just back at the NPV, when we're doing the future value, do you still have to add the B3?
Yes. Yes. Because that's sort of part of everything. Okay? Okay. With mortgages, and this is also something then that Excel is very good for, so financial modeling. Amortization. Amortizations come in when you have borrowed money, typically, and you're paying it off, but you're paying it off by paying off a fixed sum every year. And at the end of the period, you end up paying off all the loan. You've paid off your interest plus payments. So there are two ways that you can borrow money. One is you can borrow money and then pay the interest every year, and at the end repay the loan. And this is what happens if you sell a bond. If you sell a bond and I say I give Taylor $1,000, or I borrow $1,000 from him and I'm paying him 10%, I'll pay him $100 every year, and then at the end of 10 years, I give him back the loan. I return or repay the principal. So that's generally done with term loans, which are structured as essentially as bonds. With amortized loans, instead of having this balloon payment at the end, you pay off some of the principal every year. And this is typically how mortgages are done. But it's also, a lot of loans are also structured that way. In fact, even sinking fund loans to some extent are kind of structured as an amortized loan. So what happens with an amortized loan is you figure out, and we'll deal with mortgages right now, you figure out essentially how much payments you need. And we're going in a little more detail than we have to, because we're going to look at month by month payment, but I'm only really interested in the year by year that you're making in your assignment. Although if you want to do month by month, that's fine. That's fine. So how do we figure out then what payments to use month by month? I should say the following. Okay, so let's first figure out what the payments will be, right? So the house costs $300,000 and you want to make a 10% down payment. So you're looking at borrowing 90% of the $300,000. So the amount then that the mortgage will be, the original principal amount, will be say $270. Okay. Note that, again, since this amount here is a function of the house price and the down payment, you do not, in any good model, you would not put this 270 as a number. You know that's what it is, but since it comes from those two, you always put the function in. So you never put in a number when a function will do. Okay. That way, if we change the 10% to, say, 11%, right, we don't have to worry about changing the original down payment. It changes itself, right? And that is, we're saying, is a characteristic then of good modeling. Having to put the number in once, and we don't have to start searching all over the spreadsheet for where we have to make adjustments simply because we adjusted the down payment. Okay, so here, let's insert this here, and let's put number of years here and number of payments per year. Okay. And so we'll change this and we'll put 30 years here. So we're going to say essentially that suppose you have a choice, and for many financial institutions, they will allow you to pay monthly, which is sort of the usual minimum frequency. Okay? But if you want to pay off your mortgage quicker, they often will allow you to pay bi-weekly or weekly. Okay? You can actually make a mortgage payment every 2 weeks or every week. You will end up paying off your mortgage quicker that way. Okay? And so we'll leave that then. The number of payments per year will allow that to be adjustable.
You can't actually, if this was a real mortgage, you couldn't do 30 years for this because it's not at 20%. The most you could do is 25.
In Canada?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's under 20%.
In Canada?
Yeah.
Yes. But outside Canada, and you can, so for instance, in the United States. So let's leave it like this, just in case you're planning to use this to deal with the US situation. You can change it if you want, yes, to say 25 years. Or you're saying if you want 30 years, you need to make it 20% or more. Yeah? Okay, good to know. So for those of you who didn't know, okay, if you're making less than a 20% payment, two things happen. One is the maximum term of the loan is 25 years. And secondly, of course, then you have to, when do you have to pay the insurance, the CMHC insurance? Under 20%. You have to then pay an additional insurance, which isn't factored in here. So, okay. Okay, so our payment then is going to be equal to our rate. Since we're paying 6.25% here, but our frequency or our compounding frequency is less than that, our rate will be this divided by that. So it's 6.25% per annum, which comes down to about 0.6%, okay? Roughly. No, so okay, so I'll say something about that in just a moment. Okay, in just a moment. Or we should have put the payment in. Our number of periods is now this times this. So now it's essentially 30 years times 12. So that's the 360. Is that right, Olivia?
Yes.
Okay. This is, I'm doing the right stuff here. Our present value is the principal amount, which is this down payment that's here. Our future value is 0. And we're going to assume, for simplicity's sake, that you are paying at the end of each month. Okay? So, for simplicity's sake. Okay. So this is 1662 per month. Okay, per month. Now, suppose you wanted to find out how much you're paying per year. Per year. Okay. But you knew that it was still going to be a 12%. Now, you don't have to do this in your assignment. Okay? But if you wanted to find out how much you're going to pay per year, there are two ways you could figure out what it is. You could take this payment per month and find out what's the future value after 12 months. Okay? Or you could find the effective annual rate of this here per year and then use that as your annual payment. So on a per year basis, we know the effective annual rate would be 1 plus this. And if you don't believe me, you can ask George. This is something you would have done in Finance 3227. The effective annual rate, EAR, given a frequency compounding or a compounding frequency bigger than 1 is 1 plus your quoted rate or nominal rate divided by the number of compounding periods per year to the power n minus 1. So is that what you were speaking about, George? Okay. And so this then is 6.25% compounded every month is 6.43% per year. And then, of course, our annual payment would then be this amount here. This rate, now we're dealing with only 30 years. Our present value is still going to be the same. Our future value is 0. And so this would be the amount. So this means that you'd be making essentially $20,000 a year for 30 years. That seems like a lot. Yeah. Yes, Olivia. Okay, you're good? And you can check just to make sure that if this is going into an account, earning this divided by 12 every month, the future value of 12 of these payments with this interest rate on a monthly basis, you should get the same number. Okay. So you can check at home just to make sure. We're not really, for this here, we're not really interested in these yet. Okay. And in your assignment, feel free if you want. We know you want to deal with the annual payments. You can show what the rate is here and this, or you can assume that you're dealing with the effective annual rates directly. Okay. Just sort of just let me know what's going on by putting the proper comments. So, okay, and now we want to set up a table here that shows what your loan balance will be at the end of each month and how much interest you're paying each month and how much principal. So we'll have this period here. And what we want is we want to create a dynamic table. So I'm looking forward to seeing such a table then in your assignment. And a dynamic table is one that populates itself if necessary. Okay. So let's come down here and see what's in this cell that's hidden here. Okay. Okay. So this is period 1, 2, 3. What's in this cell that's hidden here is a formula that says the following. And some of this is redundant. I just wanted to introduce some more, shall we say, Excel functions. So it says the following. It says if you still have an outstanding balance, then add one more period to your payments. What this means is that once your balance gets to 0, okay, then you'll stop adding periods, okay, if you still have an outstanding balance. So that's how do we put if you still have an outstanding balance? We're saying if F10 is bigger than 0. Okay. So we'll say if F10 is bigger than 0. So if the balance is bigger than 0. But I'm going to put this here as well to just say also if F10 is blank. So sometimes it may be that it's not bigger than 0. If it has just a blank cell here and it's looking for 0, sometimes Excel gets confused. Is this a number or is it a text? In which case it will start to show error or value sign and so on. So this is just put in the case where it's blank, and we're actually going to be forcing blank cells in there. So we want to say the following. If it's bigger than 0, okay, if F10 is bigger than 0, and essentially it's blank, and F10 is blank. So this is what we're saying. How do you put AND in your if statement? Well, you use the AND function. So you're saying AND. So if F10 is bigger than 0 and F10 okay, is blank. Oh, actually, this is F10 is not blank. If it was going to be blank, so if it's bigger than 0 and it's not blank, then in this case, add a number. Increase this by 1. And so we're going to, what was here in A11 we'll just add 1 to it, plus 1. Fair enough? Yeah? Otherwise, now, you could, for instance, put this, otherwise, put a blank cell, okay? I think in the current versions of Excel, this will work fine. In old versions of Excel, which is why this function was in here, there was sometimes, this could sometimes also give problems. And so instead of using that, I had used something called the repeat function and just put a repeat blank, and just do that once. So you can choose to do this or that as your alternative. Okay, Paul? It's up to you. You can put a blank, or right, have just blank, or you can do this. This repeat function, you can kind of Google it. It allows you to populate a cell with anything in here. So if I wanted to put a star in the cell and I wanted to have 5 stars, I would just put the star 5 times, okay, in that cell. Here I just wanted, once you leave it as blank, it actually forces a blank in there, not a number. It just makes it blank. Okay. So we have that there, and so now, since this, of course, is still bigger than 0, and of course it's not blank. This looks like it's blank right now. So since this is not blank, that's fine. We then take what we've done and we drag it down to whatever length you think is the maximum length your table could possibly achieve. Okay? Let's, for the sake of, let's drag it down to, we're going to 360. So we're going to assume then that that's the 370, maybe 361. Okay? So we're going to assume 30 years is sort of the maximum. Okay? But now, of course, it will allow for, so you'll see what happens if this wasn't blank. So for instance, if here was 8, oh, let's put the 2 in there, undo. Okay, there's still some more stuff. We'll say why there's 2. This 2 is in here because there actually is something here that you can't see. If it was 0, for instance, 0, then the 2 would disappear. Okay, so let's see what's going on then in the rest of these cells here. Let's start with our payment. Our payment then, by the way, this if function that we have here, okay, we're going to kind of use it again and again. So let's build this from scratch. So I just copied the if statement here because we still want this. We're going to base everything off this balance. As long as the balance is still there, we're going to keep populating the cell. So we'll still keep this here, but instead of here, this is our payment. We know we want this payment to be there. Okay. We'll do F4, otherwise we'll keep it blank. So we're saying again, as long as this balance is not 0, our payment is going to be equal to this amount here, right? And we'll have that as constant. Okay, Kira? Okay, enter. And once we have that formula in there and we've referenced this B, it's important, of course, that we reference this absolutely, so this doesn't change. right? Then we can just double click. And if we double click, it populates it all the way down to where this was. So it figures out what's happening here and populates that all the way down to there. Okay? Actually, we won't do any more double clicking just yet. We'll finish up with the rest here. Control V. So again, we're going to keep this same piece as long as this is not 0 and it's not blank. Here, what's our interest rate going to be? Well, our interest rate then is going to be this amount here times our interest payment, F4, divided by number of payments per year, F4. So we're saying 6.25 per year divided by 12 gives you the monthly amount. If you owe $270,000 at the beginning, so at the end of the last period, this is what you owe. So how much interest do you pay? You pay interest on that entire amount. So you figure out what your interest payment is, and that says that this is how much interest you pay. So you pay 14, so you can see that of this 1662, a large chunk of it is interest in the first year. And what's the, let's just delete that. And we'll paste this here, so. So what's our principal amount? Well, if you paid 1662, but of this amount, this was your interest payment, then the difference between this and this is how much principal repayment you made for that period. So we'll say then it's equal to this guy minus this guy. And that's our principal repayment. $256. We'll leave this as 0 for now, and this is just put in there because sometimes the bank allows you the possibility to prepay. Usually at the end of the year, you're allowed them to pay down a certain percentage of your principal if you want to, if you have a certain amount of cash. So, but for now, we'll just leave it as blank. Okay. And then we'll come and see what's going on here, our balance.
Hey, Carl, would you be able to just select cell C11? Just the format now.
So we took the same if statement we had here, the same first part. If this is not, if it's bigger than 0 and it's not blank, then how much interest are you paying? You're paying 6.25% of this on a monthly basis. Okay, so 6.25%. Okay. So, yes?
I'm just getting a circular cell reference or something.
Okay. Okay, so the last part then is this guy here.
Can you just go back to D11 for a second?
D11? Okay. So again, we're saying you take this first part, and this whole part here is saying as long as your balance last year, I mean, that might be it though, you might be dealing with the balance this year here, instead of everything on this row refers to Okay. As long as the balance last month was not zero, okay, and so on, then what do you do for your principal? Well, you're saying this minus this is how much principal repayment you made. So this will drop by this, essentially. This will, you've paid $250 off of this. So that goes down by that amount. Okay, so, and so that's, we'll leave this as zero. And so that's what's happening here. Okay. Now, I'm going to come up here. Okay. And let's keep this fairly simple for now. I'll just put this here and adjust that. Okay. So we're just going to adjust this here. If the balance last year was positive, then it's simply going to be equal to this guy minus this guy here. Okay. Okay. I want to make a couple of minor adjustments.
Can you go back to the
Which?
11, the one you just did?
This one here? Yeah. There was a complicated formula in there, and instead of adjusting this formula, I want to adjust this. So I removed all that stuff and simply said that if this balance is bigger than zero, then what happens is you take this, you know you've repaid off some of this. So this minus this is your new balance. And that's a new balance. Fair enough, Amit? Sarah? No?
Yeah, sure.
So I mean, look at what's happening here. What's happening here is the following: is you started off owing $270. You figured out that you're making this amount every month. Of this amount, you want to know how much is the principal that you're repaying and how much is the interest. Well, you figure out what the interest is first of all. This is the balance, and so you're paying this interest on the balance. So the difference then must be a principal repayment. So your principal gets reduced by this amount. And so your new principal balance then is this minus that. Yes?
Don't you also have to include the extra principal payment just in case you make it into the formula?
Well, yes, but I'm ignoring that. Okay. So yeah, so you're right. If you make an extra principal payment, then this formula will take that into account. And so that's, yeah, I'm ignoring that. Okay. Okay. Now, since we have this here, I'm going to come back to this, but I'm saying we can double click on this. So we highlight the whole thing, and we can double click all the way down here. Right. Oh, I thought it should have. Well, maybe not. Let's double click that, double click that, double click this. And now when we double click this, it should populate everything, I think. Yeah. So now we can see this doesn't change. The amount of interest you pay changes depending on the balance. And because this is getting smaller, your principal repayment is getting bigger. And so it goes down all the way then to this here, 236. Now this is sort of the adjustment I want to make here. Because even though it says zero, you can see that it's actually slightly negative. It's 0.00001 or something there. And that's from the rounding off that's been happening somewhere. So we can leave it like this, kind of, okay? Okay. And we can leave it like this. But it turns out, of course, that you might end up, okay, maybe not. Okay. Okay, we'll leave it like this for now, okay? But later on, you might want to make an adjustment here. There are two adjustments you might want to make here, because sometimes strange things happen here. One adjustment is instead of having this, okay, as bigger than 0, you sometimes want to have it as bigger than, say, 1/2 of 1 cent, so 0.005. Okay, that will take care of a lot of your problem. The second adjustment is that sometimes the amount you owe in the penultimate month, and the penultimate month essentially is the month before you're supposed to finish paying, the amount you owe is slightly off, so that if you make this full payment in this final month, you overpay. Okay? You overpay. Because that amount is slightly off. In which case, you just want to adjust this amount to say that the amount you're going to pay here is going to be the minimum of this or this plus interest. And that's sort of the adjustment you make. It won't affect this now. Just saying later on, when you start doing these amortization schedules, funny things happen, especially when you start to put this in. Okay? And then you'd want to make those adjustments. Okay? Okay, for now though, let's see what happens if instead of 30 years, okay, instead of 30 years, we do say 5 years, and instead of 12 payments per month, we do 2 payments per month. So we can see, going down here, we can see that our table has sort of, oh, you see what it's doing? You see what I was talking about? You overpay this last amount here.
All of this.
Do you have these value payments? I'm not sure why.
Yeah. Well, I get it every other month. Oh, it's because it's throwing a false and down. Oh. Can you just go over D6?
D?
D6.
This one here?
Yeah.
That's just it's the EAR formula. Effective annually. So again, what's happening here now is because this guy here is not quite 0. So let's change this, and instead of that, let's put in 0.005 here and see what happens. Oh, that's not good. Zero, zero, four. Okay. I'm gonna have to.
Could you just use like a round function?
Yeah, let's just nest the whole thing in a row.
Yeah, perhaps that will work. So maybe over here we'll just nest this whole thing then in a round function here. Oh, 1 cent. That's what the problem. You can see now where the problem came from. It's this lousy 1 cent that's doing it here. So let's let's round this sucker off then to and this is just from the rounding off. Okay, so you can fine tune it. What the heck? Let's just, okay, let's see. Okay. See what happens if we do that. Okay. So we can fine tune it down to not the nearest cent, but the nearest dime. Okay, so that's fine. And so we can see then that if instead of 2 payments per year, you decide to make 4 payments per year, it populates the table all the way out to 20. Again, we're still dealing with this multi-dime, but that's okay. But we can see that the table then adjusts in size. Now, in order to format it even nicer, right, we can in fact do the following here. Let's take this first cell here and put that in, and then for these cells here, okay, let's go to a conditional format. Okay. So conditional formatting allows you to format the cell depending on certain things. You can create what rule you want. Okay. And so we will take this rule, we'll create a new rule, and we'll populate the cell essentially where the cell value, let's populate the cell where simply there are no blanks. So wherever there are no blanks, we'll populate the cell. Okay. If it's blank, then there's no formatting. But if there are no blanks, we can format it whatever way we want. And we'll simply put this guy here. We'll format it to be colored. Okay. If you want to format it to have a particular font, bold or whatever you want, that's fine. If you want to format it to have a particular number, one way you often do this is if you're dealing with, and this, of course, I've dealt with some consulting where the work is either being put in dollars or in euros. And so you wanted to know whether it's dollars or euros. So you will have essentially one cell that will have dollars or euros, okay? And you conditionally format the results depending on whether they choose dollars or euros to show the dollar sign or euro sign. And just to make it look a little nicer. So you can conditionally format it or whatever way you want. And we'll just pick that way, okay? So, you guys can't really see that, can you? You can't really see it, but it actually, so, okay. F. Sorry, let me just, I'm tired of looking at this extra principal thing. So I just wanted to get rid of it. It was irritating. Okay. F11. I assume you mean E11 now.
Yes.
Okay.
Essentially, it's saying all features. This is it's throwing this false, and then so this.
Well, in this your if statement, what happens if you didn't put any alternative? You should put the alternative as either use this or that. Okay.
you go back to the formatting thing?
Sorry,
Can you go back to the formatting?
go back to
Format?
the conditional formatting. So the rule is already in there, so I can't really use a new rule. So what I'll do is I will go back to conditional formatting. Let's manage the rules. So this is the rule essentially that we're dealing with here, and let's edit it. So we hit cells that contain, and essentially cells that contain, you can put a particular cell value, a specific text, you can put stuff like that and so on. We want cells that contain no blanks. So once it contains something, right?
You don't get that on maps.
Oh,
Yeah.
You don't have a conditional
If you go to
formatting on the
classic-
Mac.
If you go to classic, it like works that.
It's somewhat simple.
Some, yeah.
It's just a different looking thing, so you kind of mess with it.
Okay, so, yeah, so Sarah's solution when you're dealing with a Mac, she's saying you go to the classic GUI,
The classic thing, but it's still, it's different, but it's like.
but it's closer to this.
Kind
It's closer, kind of. Okay. Okay, let's just end up with, are we good? Here? Let's just end up then with graphing it. Okay, the rule, and we picked this border color, we picked the fill. I think we could go here instead. That doesn't make any difference. Okay, so let's go back to our 12. So we can see then that the color stops here and all that stuff stops. And let's go back to our 12 and 30 years, let's see. So it's gone all the way down now and it's colored all the way down to 30 years, right? All the way down to. So the last thing we'll sort of deal with is we'll just graph it. We'll have 5 minutes just to graph. And what we want to show graphically is we want to show over the 30-year period how much interest payment you make and how much principal repayment you make. Typically then, you can show it using a stack chart. The two charts that will show it neatly would be a stack chart, which is probably the best. Or you could use at the end, I would say a pie chart if you want to sum everything up. Okay. So, our amortization schedule now, we can see instead of redoing everything, I just simply picked from the amortization schedule, I simply picked what was going on here, B11, A11. So all here, I just simply picked what was going on in the amortization schedule, A11. And the interest payment, the principal repayment, and the balance. Okay. Right? So we'll just take that down to, I think we went to 371. And okay. And so really what we want to graph are just these two guys. But if you wanted to, you could show this as well, how the balance drops. So let's graph these two here. Okay. Yep. Okay, so let's insert a chart. let's see. Okay. So we could pick this guy here, and that's what it would look like, where this is the amount of interest you're paying, and this is your principal. But let's stack them on top of one another. Okay, and let's pick this instead. So this kind of shows here the amount of what you'll see from this chart is you'll see then that series 1 plots then how much interest you're paying, and series 2 takes that and flips it over here, and this plots essentially. So this is your interest payment, and it's reducing, and this is your principal, and you can see the amount of principal you're paying gets bigger over the different months, and sort of shows then how much that.
What kind of chart was that?
Oh?
What kind of chart?
It was a stack chart, so that's this guy here, okay, stack chart. Okay. Now, I actually would prefer, if you go with this one here, this is the stack percentage chart where it shows out of the full amount, and this is perhaps even preferable, out of the $16.44 you make per month, it shows 100%. This is the full amount you make each period. Out of that, you can see about 85% goes to principal at the beginning, and then about, say, 15% goes to, 85% goes to interest, and 15% goes to principal. And as time goes by, the percentage that goes to interest gets smaller. And by the time you get out here to the end, okay, 100% essentially is going, it's almost 100% going to the principal and almost 0% to interest. So you can use this stack chart, or you can use it. They look the same. One just shows the dollar figures, and one shows everything in terms of percentage. Yeah. So let's start with this, and of course, with that, you would just clean up the chart to you just clean up the chart. So you clean up the chart, you would put then, and I'll let you do it, right? You can put then your series 1, of course. You can think. Text option. Text box. Format data series. Well. Okay. So you could put the chart title here to the amortization schedule, interest versus payment. You could get rid of this sort of series 1 and series 2, and instead of doing that, you could change this and just insert a text box. So you could do it so that, let's put it here, so that it looks, say, something like this. Okay. So it looks, say, something like this. Okay. Interest, principal, bonds. What do you think, Olivia? Yeah. You think in your second assignment you could get something like this going on? Interest, principal, or account balance. You could show, for instance, what's in your account. Pre-retirement, you see your balance increasing, and then post-retirement, I think that you asked to do that, right? To show what the balance is pre-retirement. It should look something like this. Okay, we need to go. It should look something like this. Okay. That's all for today.